doing for everybody is I always say, hey, why don't you give me 60 seconds, and no one has come close to 60 seconds. But I say it nonetheless. If you can maybe give us a 60-second introduction of yourself and tell us why you're running for this particular department. I know the answer. Well, one of those two questions I know the answer for you, Sandra, but I don't need to know why you're running for this department. But if you could perhaps introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the line and go forward from there.
Excuse me, I lose my voice. I'm Judge Sandy Pomrenze. This is my 10th year on the bench. I'm running for re-election because I'm not done. I have been working really hard to have a fair courtroom. I actually had an attorney tell me the other day that he thought I had an innate sense of fairness. Fairness to me being important, the rule of law being extremely important, as Mr. Paris well knows. And also, I want to do what I can to make sure that we have kids with a real future in our community. Another thing I do, and I've been working on it, is trying to affect the laws that impact people, the rules that impact people. I successfully got a bill through the Nevada legislature last session which dealt with an access to justice issue. We had a problem in the straight-out custody cases, not the divorce, not the paternity, straight-out custody where there was no provision for attorney's fees. And aside from the fact that it put the attorneys in a difficult situation, it really created an access to justice, an unfairness when you had one party who had the resources to hire an attorney, another litigant did not. So I closed what I call that donut hole. I had a lot of help from Assemblyman Eisen and especially Assemblywoman Cohn. I drafted the bill, I got it to them, they tweaked it a little bit, and then it passed unanimously through the judiciary committees in both houses and then unanimously with the legislature, and Governor Sandoval signed it, and it was made effective October 1 of 2013, or excuse me, yeah, October 1 of 2013. That was a great experience. Between that and sitting on our court's legislative committee, I developed an interest in trying to affect some changes to make the court system a little more accessible and easier to understand. So I sit on our rules committee. I really want to take a look at our statutory scheme, which is just scattershot. It's crazy, and we have so many competing statutes, and it creates a lot of problems. There's a problem with that. There's problems with the way we calculate child support, especially when you have a hybrid of, let's say, one parent has 2 kids and the other parent has 1, who pays what for child support. And I know there are some other states that have a way of handling that, and I'd love to see us do that. So between that and devoting my attention to the court, I'm just not done.
David, why have you run for this particular race?
Well, first let me say this tie, my son's wife made it. She's Vietnamese, so. But she sews very well. Anyhow, I am running not against Judge Pomrenze personally. I have no animus towards her. I have no malice. Basically, I'm running against her record. This is the survey done by the attorneys who appeared in front of her. And so if she were to change and not have those type of ratings, I wouldn't be running against her. And if she were to change and not be like that anymore, I see no reason to run against her. But I've been practicing since 1983.
I've never seen that. I have no idea what he's driving at.
I've been practicing since 1983, and the first job I had basically was clerking for a judge up in Reno. It was Judge Peter I. Breen, and he ended up being the longest sitting judge in the state of Nevada. And he controlled his courtroom, and he basically heard the case, applied the facts to the case. And a lot of times that doesn't happen in family court. And that is something that I think ought to be done. And the case ought to be arrived at a reasonable conclusion, and the case should be explained as to why the judge made that determination. One of the things that I think is a problem is that right now the attorneys write the order, and they don't even write the order as it is in district court downtown, which handles civil and criminal cases. They write the order as the way they do in family court, which now is they just take and copy the court clerk's minutes. Because if you sit there, and when I moved down here in '96, and by the way, about half of my practice is devoted to family law, I took laborious notes when the order was being stated by the bench. And in doing that, when I was ordered then to draft that order, while it was fresh in my mind, and while I could still read my notes, I went back to my office and I did that order. And then I'd send it in, and then the judge's law clerk, more recently now, in the last few years, they'll look at it and they say, well, this doesn't mirror the minutes. And so, and then they just do a little sticky note as to the judge sign here. So I think the judge has to have more control and more review over their order as to what they want the final decision to be. Maybe there's some interpretation that is missed by the court clerk, and they make mistakes. And so I think that the judges need more of a hand-on relationship with their final order. So I think that I have the ability and the knowledge and the experience so as to be able to take the bench. Thank you.
Nathan.
I've been a family law attorney primarily for almost 18 years. I've been practicing in Clark County since 1996. It's my 18th year, and it's been not exclusively, but the majority of what I've done during that time. And sometimes people will come to interview with me to start the process, and other times they'll come to seek out an attorney after they've already been to court once and they didn't have great experience. And people in that category, the most common thing that I hear them tell me is the judge wouldn't let me talk, or something like the judge had his or her mind made up already before I opened my mouth. And I think that that's vitally important because there's a cathartic effect for the litigants. They're going through one of the most difficult times in their life, whether you're in a custody case or you're in a divorce case. Emotions are running high. So it's important for them to be able to feel that the judge has understood the things that they are, their point of view, the things that they're saying, and having considered that, explains the decision why they're doing why they're ruling as they do. And I think that my personality, my approach is such that those are strengths of mine. I'm not someone who will make up my mind until the right time, which is after you hear the evidence or you hear the arguments. And if there's a predisposition in a particular case to render a ruling, then you have to set that aside and hear people out without making your decision. I've also read the review journal ratings, and the reason I chose this department is I think that strength of mine is something that could be an improvement in this particular department. There can be a better sense that we don't make a decision until we have all the facts, and that will be something that I think that I can lend. I've been on this side of the bench for all these years, and I think I know something about how lawyers view things and how the litigants view things as far as how the decision's made. Been married for 27 years. I just turned 50. I'm a grandpa.
I'm going to cut you off right there. You do not look like you're 50. You do not look like you're 50.
I was saying, I'm trying to say a lot of experience. I even though I got a bit of a baby.
Just throwing that out there. So, yeah. All right, please continue.
So,
clean living. I don't know what it is.
Or something like that.
Props to you.
Picture in the attic of Dorian Gray or something. But I've lived in this community a long time. I have some experience with the Asian community. I was a Mormon missionary in Japan, and I lived there teaching English with my wife after I graduated from college. So I have that always an affinity for the Asian community, and I've tried to involve myself in some of the activities that that I'm learning about from my campaign manager. So we're glad to be here.
Well, Nathan, you have just under 20 years of experience in the family law trenches, so to speak. What do you see as the biggest inefficiency in family court? And if elected, what are you going to do to address it? And obviously, you will each have opportunities to answer that same question.
One of the biggest inefficiencies I see is a tendency to have a lot of status checks and sort of micromanaging people. I believe that a judge's job is to make rulings on things that the people cannot work out themselves. And sometimes there's a tendency to sort of micromanage things. If people have a settlement, great, that's wonderful. Don't have a bunch of status checks. If at some point, if they can't work it out, set a trial and make a ruling. We can't fix people's lives. There's an element of social work in what is done. But at the end of the day, you make rulings on issues that come before you, and then life goes on. So I think that's something that we can do more efficiently, is to get prompt hearings when the people have said, we can't work this out. Not all this, go out in the hall, try again, go for an hour at the trial time to try a little harder to work it out. If they've made the determination that they want you, the judge, to decide, it's time to start court, make the decision. They can always work things out, or during the break say, hey, listen, we settled it, but it's time for court, let's have court.
Okay. David, same question. Biggest inefficiency in family court?
Right. Broadly speaking, the only thing I can think of at this moment is there's a tremendous caseload over there, and it comes to reality to me also because I've attended other interviews, and family court judges are spouting the numbers of cases that they've had, and it's a tremendous caseload, as I said. But if people are at a point when they cannot resolve it, then they should have their opportunity to be heard and have evidentiary hearing and have their trial. And so I see there's a lot of avoidance in that in a lot of departments. They seem to push, well, let's continue this a little further, like Nathan said. So I think the judge needs to make themselves available and be able to allow these people to try their case.
Officially,
I'm thinking about this because I can give you a lot of answers to that question, having been in the trenches with that. One of the biggest problems I think we have is that we have our family division judges in two different buildings. We have a lot of attorneys. In fact, I would say the majority of our attorneys are either sole practitioners or in small firms. And they have to be in many, many different places at many, many different times. And we're often, the marshals are going back and forth trying to figure out who can get them in quickly and who can get them out so that they can go to the next courtroom. And that creates its own set of problems. We do have a very high caseload, and one thing I've noticed, I always say I can see the economy from the bottom up, and actually the workload is increasing all of a sudden, and to me it's a sign the economy is good. So that's the good news, bad news. And the other thing is I'm not a fan of status checks. On the other hand, the life of a family is a series of changes. And oftentimes we'll get a case that's in our court and there's something else going on and we need to see where that is going. I might set a status check, and as I said, I don't do it very often, but I might have to set a status check to bring people back to determine what happened to somebody's criminal case, or to find out if they were able to sell the house, or if they're going into bankruptcy, or if one of the children has had a medical evaluation, or one of the litigants has had a medical evaluation. And sometimes it's unfair to the parties or their kids to decide something until we have a better picture of how we can best serve the family. Does that create some inefficiencies? Sure, but it's the nature of the beast. I mean, families are messy. There's no way around it. And they go through changes all the time. I mean, kids get older. Kids go through these periods of time. Parents have their own challenges. Sometimes they're working, then sometimes they lose a job. I know we have a lot of challenges when it comes to those members of the trades who, as you all probably know, went through a substantial period of time of no work within the bargaining unit. And now they're starting to get work, but it's sort of scattershot. And so sometimes there's not the answer. And if you don't have the answer, to make a ruling without sufficient information, I think does a disservice to the litigants and may result in a terrible disservice to their children.
I apologize, actually to all three of you at this point in time. I usually lead with this, and I've forgotten in front of almost every family court judge where we've had an incumbent. I don't do a lot of family law. It's very.
I miss you.
With all due respect, I don't miss you guys. It's just nothing personal. It's a very draining area of law, and I will happily say that for the record. I have no, just full disclosure, I have no active cases in front of Judge Pomrenze at this point in time.
Okay.
If one somehow comes up on the radar, I'll shoot you guys an email, say, hey, I have one here, but I have nothing active in front of Judge Pomrenze. We have closed cases, obviously, from the past decade-ish, but nothing active in front of her, and I want to say the last time I saw you in court was 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half, I don't even remember.
Was it even as short as 2 years ago? It just seems to be years.
It's been a long time. So just wanted to, for your edification, I don't do a lot of family law, and I'm happy to keep it that way. I'll let you guys have at it. That having been said, next question we'll start with, do you prefer Sandy? Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll start with Sandy and then go back across.
Yeah, my mother called me Sandra when she was mad at me.
Ah, yeah. That's the only time I ever heard my middle name, so I still don't like hearing it to this day. We've heard both of the other individuals in the room have mentioned the judicial performance exam, or evaluations that come out every 2 years. We all know what I'm talking about. So, my question to you is this. What ideas do you have to make those evaluations either more transparent or more accurate or perhaps more reflective of the work that not only you but the other judges are doing in relation to one another, since that's really the only opportunity the general public, that the civilians have to kind of look into that world and see how everyone ranks?
I want to address this last poll because I do think it's important, and that will lead into how I view this. The last poll, I had a less than 50% retention. But then when I got the statistics on the poll, in fact, Glenn Cook, when I interviewed with him at the RJ, pointed this out. I was above average or average with the majority of attorneys on everything else. In other words, my decision making, my courtesy in the courtroom, my fairness to litigants, my willingness to hear them. I was above average mostly, and this was the majority of the attorneys. And then you get down to this retention. There is no way to tell when somebody fills out that form if they've ever appeared in front of that judge. It is just nutty. And if there's one person who decides that they don't like you, they may get a couple of friends to go and let's go bash somebody. It's happened to any number of judges. And even the RJ, by the way, admits that, and I don't want to throw the gender card out, but admits that women are rated like 10% lower than men for doing the same thing. And I'm not going to fall back on that and say, well, that's an explanation or an excuse. But I think that just looking at the bare numbers, you have to look at all of the numbers. And in all of the numbers, I was rated really well by the majority of the attorneys. And then you get down to this category, and so you don't even know who filled that out. So that's one of the problems. Another problem is this anonymous comment thing. I mean, we've all experienced now with the internet how it has become a forum for anonymous bullying. And what I find ironic, very, very ironic, is even the RJ, when you comment on an article now, you have to just kind of disclose who you are. So even they recognize that anonymous comments are not beneficial. And sometimes it's somebody that just wants to say something lousy to you. So, the first thing we need to change as far as transparency is some way to confirm that any attorney who's participating in the poll has appeared in front of that judge, let's say in the last year. Because otherwise, it could be some criminal attorney that has a friend who didn't like a particular judge, or it could be a litigant who had who didn't get the ruling that he or she wanted, but knows an attorney. And that's how it works. And it's a frightening and it's a hurtful prospect, because I frankly think every judge on that bench works very hard to do the right thing for the community. And it's a bully pulpit. And I think we have to have more transparency. At a minimum, try to get some way of confirming that the attorneys who are participating in the poll are A, completing the entire poll, not just picking one subject, and B, have some firsthand recent experience with that judge. That poll does not do it. There was an effort by the Supreme Court. It was called the Article 6 Commission. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was an effort by some very well-respected members of the bar and the state bar and the Supreme Court to come up with a better way to evaluate judges, maybe bringing people in to observe the judges who really understand making rulings available, taking a look at how the judge is running his or her court, how quickly they're getting their decisions out, and would have that neutral, what is the judge doing? Is this judge efficient? Is this judge making sense in their rulings? Are they following the law? Are they being even-handed with, men and women? Are they displaying any bias whatsoever? We don't have that. We just don't have it. And that's where it somewhat does a disservice to the judges who work so hard, but even more so a disservice to the public who are going to vote.
Well, I just learned that 60% of the individual that goes to court, they're not represented, correct?
That is a problem. I mean, now you know why I wanted that bill to get through so badly.
That's why the poll is not accurate. Simple as that.
Well, I can give you a plethora of reasons, and like I said, I have no idea what Mr. Ford showed you, but it might be those anonymous bully pulpit comments that you don't know where they come from. I don't need to look at it, sir. You don't know if it's somebody who really appeared in front of you or somebody who has a friend that has an axe to grind. You just don't know. And as I say, it's so ironic that even the RJ doesn't want that in their own articles.
David, I can imagine you have absolutely nothing to say about this topic, right?
Well, this is just what the RJ has as to the opinions made by the people, the attorneys who appear in front of this department.
No, it's only the attorneys, right? It's not the people.
Okay. I think it's only, just for the edification, I think it's only sent out to licensed attorneys in Nevada.
To the people.
Yeah, not to litigants.
Absolutely.
I have personal, this is personal. I have literally appeared in the court of a family court, and the judge was very, very fair, where that the other party was represented heavily by attorneys. And little old me there, wow. And the judge was very, very fair. He's looking at both sides, and just to let you know, this is personal experience, and that's why it makes it great when judge is just right in the middle there. Yeah.
Was that a judge who's currently in this room?
No.
Okay.
No, that was.
I couldn't tell. I assume so, but okay.
That's at least 10 years ago.
Okay.
Just have to ask if we're.
But
Yeah. Just for full disclosure.
oh yes.
But you would have wanted to fill out the poll, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would love to fill it out, but we'll never get one.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I'm sorry, we don't want to. David, this is your opportunity. Although I appreciate
There we go.
you adding that, Kevin. We've had other individuals say, well, maybe we should have litigants fill it out as well, in addition to the attorneys. But that's someone else's idea, and we'll let you tell us yours.
Okay, first off, I think that's a challenge to the integrity of the bar here. The attorney is going to lie and say, I'm going to make an opinion on this judge I've never appeared in front of. One of the mainstays of that poll is it says only if you have appeared in front of this judge can you make an opinion, a personal opinion on the performance of that judge? And so I take it with honor and respect that I am not going to talk about a judge who I maybe have had just a brief moment in front of. I only do the rating as to the judges I personally appeared in front of and I have experience with. And I'm assuming, because the bar has integrity, that everybody's done that. Now, as to litigants who are not represented by people, they've got their own poll going on right now. Somebody did a Facebook, I got an anonymous phone call that says, remove Sandra Pomrenze. And those are people who are appeared in front of her, and they have given their horror stories in that Facebook page.
Lost the case. Well, here's the thing. Okay, I'll state, like, you know, I have dear friends that are attorneys, lawyers. I got a bunch of attorneys that's working for us right now. But there are also attorneys that's practicing state of Nevada, which that supposedly that attorneys trust account, is it trust account? Okay, supposed to be secret. Am I correct? Well, we have placed in a lot of fund in the trust account and was taken for personal usage the next day. And it's been proven already, but it is actually in court. There's nothing to do over here. So I believe it's in each individual integrity, not in the whole thing where that, well, individually, if they lost the case, they're not going to be happy, obviously. Attorney get yelled at, say, shut up, I'm looking at your paperwork. That's what your complaint is. Understand the complaint. Don't need to go over it. And I agree with that too. So that's where we at. That's why this panel is here. And, you know, may the best one win.
I would venture to say that the attorney who lacks integrity, that would commit criminal acts, doesn't even fill out the poll because he doesn't care.
Hope so.
But let's get back to then
Yeah.
to the poll again. This year is the first year that the RJ has had, they had a 3-day running of saying, here's what the poll is, here's why we conducted it, here is why we feel that there's some value to it. And they took 3 days. Previously, they've had the poll up north when I practice up there, and when I would be asked by someone about a judge, I would say, well, look to that poll. What poll? Well, it's only by attorneys who appeared in front of that judge, etc. And I said, who knows better than the person who litigates the case constantly in that courtroom? Not somebody who gets the ballot for the first time and it says, well, incumbent, let's see. I haven't read anything about that person, I don't know, so let's just keep them in there. And that is the way the public kind of feels. They don't have any firsthand knowledge. And so the polls up north have been ignored. The polls down here have been ignored. In fact, there have been opinions before this year that, well, it's the brotherhood, and this is, you know.
Well, actually, I would just ignore the poll very simply because we have different runners that just say they simply never got the ticket, the poll ticket.
So, some individuals who we've interviewed earlier today have said they never received an invitation to do the poll, even though they have been licensed attorneys for several years. Which, things like that fall through the cracks. I mean, there's no way around it.
Speaking of the poll, there is a poll on my website. It's a list of about between 75 and 80, mostly attorneys, and I'd say about 75% family law attorneys, the most prominent ones in town, that have publicized their support for me. I call that a poll too.
And I call it a poll too when I walk into the courtroom and someone will say, well, how you doing today? And I'll say, I'm going in Department P. Well, don't worry, she does that to everybody. That is a personal poll that I receive when I walk in the courtroom. And so that's why I figured there's some integrity to this and some validity to it. And one other example was that there is a municipal court judge in Henderson who she got very bad ratings, and when she was running again, she says, well, that's because defense attorneys who appeared in front of me, they don't like me because I'm tough on crime. No, they are challenging you as someone who should not be on the bench for reasons that you do not do a proper job as a judge. And that is what this poll says.
Unless our judge poll, they send people out to each individually verify and ask, document it. Now they can keep it in the file, just for the sake. But if they don't do that,
And I'm sorry to cut you off, Kevin. We're over time, but obviously there was some
sorry about that.
deep issues we needed to get into. But we haven't given Nathan a chance to respond, so we have to give him an opportunity.
Well, the pressure's on because you're some Xgrel it's time. No, I'm kidding. I'm not here to defend the poll, but I wanted to comment your concern. First of all, I think they should solicit the opinions of litigants because those people have their own experience and they are the majority of people who practice in front of a judge. I think the intention of the poll is a litigant will have probably just their own case and have their own experience, and in theory at least, if you have attorneys who appear several times a week in front of family court judges, you ought to have, they may have a judge on a bad day, or they may just not think the judge sees things right one day, and a different day that judge nails it. It should, in theory, give a broader and more truthful experience. So the question was, how could they improve the poll? I think that one thing they could do is they could indicate that only people who've appeared in front of this judge 10 times in the last year, or 20 times, or some sort of a number. Mr. Ford is correct that there's sort of a certification that only answer this if you have appeared in front of this judge, but I think they could maybe make it so you have quite a bit, because you may have appeared in front of that judge on their second day when they were elected, 10 years ago or 5 years ago or something, and everybody has a learning curve. So I think that would be something they could do. They could also maybe have questions that were tailored to family law. They're the same questions for everybody, and I think they could have some questions to sort of fine-tune their knowledge or experience in family law. The other thing I want to say about it is also it gives a barometer to compare. All family court judges are in the same boat. They will have somebody who's disgruntled that said, I can't stand that judge, he didn't like me, he wasn't fair, he didn't like people of my race or religion or whatever. But there are judges there who have 80 or 90% plus ratings on these polls, and those are from lawyers who one day their client lost, one day their client won, and so I think it's indicative somewhat that there may be a problem in this department. I also just wanted to say briefly, I don't have the poll in front of me. I think Mr. Ford had it. I believe that the ratings in the last one was generally 53% don't retain this judge, and 47 do retain the judge. As I recall, and I may be wrong, there were also more of inadequacy ratings and adequacy in areas like following the law and courtesy and so forth. I don't believe it was accurate but it speaks for itself. Whatever it says, it says. But my view is that it's not always, but it's a fairly accurate barometer of how I've seen judges overall, although maybe skewed somewhat. But I believe it's a fairly accurate barometer of how people are doing on the criterion poll.
Okay. Well, we do have some other questions, but we're already about 7 minutes over time, so that's my fault for not moderating things as well. But again, we appreciate you guys coming out. It was this was one